If you're not Gen Z, it's nearly impossible to describe the place that Taylor Swift has in our cultural consciousness. It's not just the string of media-worthy moments that have kept the headlines rolling since Midnight's released, but for the entire time that we have been active music consumers, she has been the most famous white woman on Earth, who is still alive. Yet, despite being someone who prides himself on listening and appreciating a wide variety of genres, I haven't actually listened to any of her music. And when 2/3 of the people you know in real life seem to be taking a day off their real jobs to go sit at home refreshing a webpage, there's gotta be something worth digging into here. I should talk about where I'm approaching this from. I could say that I'm actually a sound engineer, but musically I'm a non-standard indie shithead. If you want to know what my favourite song is, here's 2 seconds of it. If your immediate response is to ask what the fuck that just was, that's okay. Music is entirely subjective, and that will most likely not be the last time in this video that you disagree with me. The year is 2006, an oath, you can tell. There's nothing behind those eyes. I know very little about country music because it keeps making me cringe, but at first glance, this album's cute. Fun songs about love and being a teenager with a good number of solid hooks and well thought out lyrics. But about halfway through the album I realised that I would have to split my thoughts on the songwriting, which is almost universally pretty good, and the production, which is... My problem is that as a whole, this album is soup. The instrument choices for each song here don't feel like someone actually thought about it, but instead the producers went, well, we're making a country album, so we have to use this. The drums sound exactly the same on every song, vocal harmonies above and below are tacked on to every chorus to the point that it sounds like Taylor has vocal training wheels, and most infuriating to me at least, every guitar solo on this album is complete dog water. You can feel the session musician who just wants to finish recording this album for some teenager and go down to the pub with his mates, except it's almost certainly Nathan Chapman doing them. He's the producer. He's the guy in charge of making the album sound good. What the fuck? That's not to say that the songwriting is faultless. A few of the songs feel a bit procedural, and a lot of them end really abruptly in a way that feels sort of poorly thought out. My problem with weighting these is that I can't really fault Taylor for being inexperienced or having to rush things. Congratulations, Taylor Swift, on having 2 country #1s. You are now significantly famous, so it's time to really cultivate an image. Yeah, for some reason I don't like this album as much as her debut. The production is basically the same with most of the same problems. My main gripe is that this album feels less consistent than the debut. You Belong With Me, Love Story, bangers. But a decent number of the other tracks don't feel like they've come from a place as personal as the debut. I'll be blunt, from this album onwards, even as she will follow the money away from country and into full-blown pop, it's clear that Taylor's appeal is being designed. Specifically, she is going to be the straightest, whitest woman on earth. With the exception of things that we have socially decided she will never be allowed to keep private, Taylor Swift will be an empty shell to be sold to consumers. And in a way, this appears to have been her personal goal. One of the few ways that Taylor can be genuinely said to have been innovating is how she marketed her albums. MySpace, daily blogs, Easter eggs and album material, directly and personally replying to comments. Long before the phrase entered the public consciousness, Taylor Swift was cultivating parasocial relationships. And it's not like she ever stopped. The Swifties currently skipping through this video to try and work out if it's Taylor Neg are proof of that. The signs at her shows with boys' phone numbers, long meet and greets, calling her fans her friends, all to serve that single goal. At a surface level, Speak Now seems like another helping of the sounds that Taylor has used on the last 2 albums, and while that is objectively true, there have clearly been developments. A lot of the songs feel bigger now, string sections, more electric guitars, and Taylor's putting way more energy into her vocal performances. She's clearly done more work on the lyrics too, but that work is marked by the overwhelming amount of spite that seems to soak into nearly every song on the album. When the heartfelt regret of Back to December is replaced by the barely contained hatred of Speak Now, there's a problem that no studio time can fix. One problem that could have been fixed in production, though, is album ordering. You may be thinking, who cares, it's just a collection of songs, but it's a little odd to have Never Grow Up and Innocent be separated like that, no? I will preempt the rest of this video and say that there are no albums in this list where she nails this. There are some points where it's alright, but mostly it's bad. One other thing really began to get on my nerves as I listened through this album, which had started in her debut and was only getting worse: song structure. Verse, chorus, loud bridge, soft bridge, final chorus. Here's every song on the first 3 albums, and here's every song that uses this exact structure. This is absurd. By the time I hit Enchanted, I was reliably predicting how songs that I had literally never heard would be playing out. You can see in my first listening notes, I was being driven insane. That said, Enchanted, Never Grow Up, Dear John, all top tier, her best one so far. Next album. I had heard before I got here that this album would be the turning point where Taylor went from country to pop. I did not expect that meant this album literally oscillates between country and pop song by song. As part of that, this album is almost absurdly 2012. References to hipsters, that early 2010s pop sound that feels much more like Katy Perry, and the fucking dubstep. God, so much of this album is so incredibly dated. I feel like I'm gonna hear Gangnam Style, go outside and see a flash mob. This album's inconsistency is making it hard to talk about. State of Grace and Red are actually quality tracks, but so many of the others are so immediately forgettable. Some of these contrast points on the album are unintentionally hilarious in their absurdity though. Everything Has Changed demonstrates just how wide the gulf in singing ability between Taylor and Ed Sheeran is, but on the last time she blends magically with Gary Lightbody in a way that won't be matched until a lot later in her discography. And seriously? We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, followed immediately by Stay, Stay, Stay? This isn't just tonal whiplash, I feel like I'm in the emotional pear wiggler. It's not a great album, time to move on. Wee! With a more consistent sound, this is a serious uptick from Red and scrapes into becoming my high watermark so far. It mostly earns this by simply not tripping over its own feet as much. This album is just solidly made pop song after solidly made pop song, and is generally just an enjoyable listen. Weirdly enough, the two songs I actually remember from when this dropped are actually the least good on the album. They're joined in this spot by Wildest Dreams, where Taylor has apparently fallen in love with the first Google image search result for white man. But the thing that really makes this album land for me is just how goddamn hooky it is. Nearly every song here has something that grabs me straight away, takes up residence in my brain, and starts firefights with the cops I send to evict it. Every song grooves better than our previous albums too. I'm catching myself dancing in my chair to a good number of these tracks. Honestly, fuck it, this album is fun. It feels like Taylor has really hit her stride as a pop artist, and has found the consistency that she needs to produce a great album. You know what I'm gonna say. First thing, who let these two landed gentry motherfuckers rap on a track, and who the fuck put it on the album? This isn't just a cutting room floor track. Take the hard drive that it's on and bury it deep in the Mojave for the survivors of the impending apocalypse to find. In fact, the whole front half of this album is a train wreck, and the subsequent chemical spillage means that the rest of the album never really recovers. To her credit, Taylor does try. Getaway Car and Dancing With Our Hands Tied are pretty good, and New Year's Day is a really heartfelt ending to this album, but Call It What You Want and King of My Heart are just slop. I'll also note, mostly because it's interesting rather than good, that this album is way more openly sexual than anything before it. It's actually pretty well done in each song, even if the song itself is just bleh, which was a pleasant surprise. But it doesn't really matter. It's raw, where's the lamb sauce, it's not fit for human consumption, throw it out and start again. Next album. This is the follow-up that 1989 deserved. This album is very disparate, but not in the whiplash-inducing way that some of the previous ones were. But the defining feature of this album for me is how mature Taylor sounds. In a way, it reminds me of her debut, where the album feels carefree and easygoing, but Taylor has gone from youthful naivete to a place of mature life experience. Paper Rings could not have been written by the Taylor writing Speak Now, but that carefree attitude can cross over into being overbearing or cringy. Most of the album deftly walks this line, but You Need to Calm Down and me slip over it and damage the songs a bit. This lyric is just inexcusable too. Did no one think that they could tell Taylor this sucked? Honestly, I don't have a lot of notes. It's just a really solid album. I'd gladly put this on again. With this album, I get it. It all falls into place here. It's a massive stylistic shift, but unlike Red, she fully commits and reaps the rewards. The best song on here is also a microcosm of the project as a whole, Exile. There isn't a single misstep here. Swift and Vernon fit so well together it's like they were made for it. The instrumental fits together so well that it ends up just washing over you, carrying the song's brilliantly executed emotional intimacy with it. This is the first song across Taylor's entire discography that I can safely say is a 10 out of 10. Every other song on here is a high watermark in some way or another. The lyrics are more thoughtful and cohesive than ever, and Taylor has taken that maturity you could detect on Lover and applied it to much more emotionally complex and difficult material in a way that I don't think she could have before. The way that regret, grief, and longing are handled on this album are incredible by any standard and easily eclipse the aggressive, spiteful, and frankly spoiled way that her previous work has worked through similar situations. Even as the album starts to flag a bit towards the end, those songs would still be highlights on nearly any of her previous albums. It's a little hard not to be disappointed by this album, even though I think it's still probably in her top 3. And I understand that when you're working in the same style with a very short turnaround time, it's going to be difficult to not sound like you're making offcuts from the last project. If this album shows anything as a whole, it's just how fragile the tracks on Folklore were. The instrumentals across the album just barely fail to fit together and drag whole songs down with them. Instead of being delicately beautiful, this album's collaboration with Bon Iver is damn near incoherent, like a mess of failed ideas thrown into one big pile. There's also a lot more country influence on this album, which doesn't really land, ever. The worst crime this album commits, though, is having a few tracks that are just bleh. Even with some of the better songs in this album, you can feel her grip on whatever magic she found to make Folklore become ever more tenuous. It's just a bit sad. I don't want to wait for her to start crushing it again. Midnight's almost feels like a reaction to her two previous albums, like she felt she needed to put out some music that didn't feel as bleak. The music is at a higher standard than any of her albums before Lover, but the genre influences and song quality are a lot more all over the place. There are some parts to this album that just don't land. Karma is, and I say this in the most derogatory way possible, a very millennial song. Antihero, why? I know what it's getting at, but it keeps tripping over its own feet. There are some properly good songs though. Midnight Rain is a bizarre half song, but in a way that absolutely works for the song's lyrical topic. Lavender Haze is just a good pop song that delivers all the things that Taylor managed on Lover. There are also some genuinely mystifying decisions. For one, why is she rapping again on Bejeweled? We went over this. She also keeps swearing? That's definitely something that can work in places, but Snow on the Beach is not one of them. It completely destroys the effect of the song that honestly would have been an album highlight without it. And then we get to Mastermind. This is the creepiest fucking song I've ever heard, and not in like the subtle, self-reflective way that makes a song like Every Breath You Take work. No, this shit is what you read on the walls of an abandoned asylum that used to house that kind of Lana Del Rey stan. It leaves the same impression on this album that a steel-tipped boot to the balls leaves at a society function. The strangest thing about this project has been that I don't think my opinion of Taylor has changed that much. Prior to this, the little that I had heard told me that she was a decent songwriter who made slightly above average pop music for an absurdly large and concerningly dedicated fanbase. Taken as a whole, that's still true. I now know that her range is a lot wider, and of course I think Folklore is great, but Folklore wasn't the album that got her as famous as she is. So no, I still don't quite get Taylor, and I'm not sure I ever will. I think there's plenty of music out there that's consistently better that you might end up loving just as much or more than her music. But millions disagree, and my opinion is not more valuable than theirs. So if you think you can explain that, please do, but I'm not certain I'll understand.